It began on a rainy night in the small town of Meerut, where the streets glistened with water and the houses sat in quiet rows, their windows glowing faintly like half-shut eyes. On the edge of this town stood a crumbling, two-story house, its paint flaking off, its iron gate hanging loose on rusted hinges. It was here that the strange story of the Labubu doll first began. A man named Rajiv, a local antique collector, had recently returned from an estate sale in Kolkata. He was a quiet man, the kind who kept to himself, often disappearing for days in search of old artifacts, furniture, and trinkets he could sell in his small shop. That night, however, he carried something home that he would never put up for sale. Wrapped in an old silk cloth, tied with string, was a peculiar doll. It was small, no more than 2 feet tall, with wide glassy eyes that seemed too large for its head. The doll's hair was sparse, clumped together in patches as if it had been burned. Its mouth was painted in a crooked smile that was neither friendly nor kind. It was mocking, sinister, alive. On its chest, stitched with black thread, was a single word: Labubu. Rajiv hadn't planned to buy the doll. In fact, when he saw it in the dusty corner of the estate sale, he felt a strange heaviness in his chest, as though the room had grown colder. The seller had practically begged him to take it, muttering something about getting rid of cursed belongings. Rajiv thought little of it. Superstitions never bothered him. To him, it was just an old toy with a peculiar history, a perfect centerpiece for his shop window. That night, when he reached home, he placed the doll in his study. The rain had not stopped. Water drummed against the roof, and the howling wind seeped through cracks in the old house. Rajiv lit a lamp, unwrapped the doll, and set it upright on a chair. The moment he stepped back, he swore its glassy eyes flickered in the lamplight, as though it had blinked. He shook the thought away, blaming exhaustion. Later, as he ate his dinner alone in the kitchen, a faint sound drifted from the study, a soft creak like wood bending. He paused, spoon halfway to his lips. The house was old, wood always creaked. But then came another sound, a whisper. So faint it was almost drowned out by the storm. He leaned forward, straining to listen. It was louder, high-pitched, childlike. The spoon slipped from his hand, clattering against the floor. Rajiv stood quickly, his heart pounding. The study door was closed, but he could still hear it, the faintest giggle, coming from behind that wooden frame. He forced a laugh at himself. The wind, he muttered. Just the wind. But when he opened the study door, the room was silent. The doll sat where he had left it, glass eyes unblinking, crooked smile frozen in place. And yet something was different. The doll's head was tilted slightly to the left, its gaze fixed on him, as though it had been waiting. Rajiv's throat tightened. He stared at the doll for a long time before shaking his head. Old wood, he whispered. Creaks, shifts, nothing more. He placed a cloth over the doll's face, dimming its eerie stare, and locked the study behind him. That night, as he lay in bed, the storm raged louder. He drifted between waking and sleep, the sound of rain becoming a rhythm in his ears. Somewhere in the blur of dreams, he heard it again. That laugh. Clear this time, right beside him. He woke with a start. His room was dark, lit only by flashes of lightning through the cracked curtains. His eyes scanned the room, empty, silent. But the blanket at his feet felt heavier, as if something small and cold was pressing against it. With trembling hands, he pulled it back. Nothing, just his imagination. Trying to calm his nerves, he got out of bed to get a glass of water. But as he stepped into the hallway, his heart froze. The study door, which he had locked hours ago, was wide open, and sitting in the middle of the hallway floor, facing his bedroom, was the doll. Its cloth covering was gone. Its glass eyes gleamed in the dark. Its crooked smile stretched wider than he remembered. Rajiv stumbled backward, nearly dropping the glass he had been holding. His breath caught in his throat. He tried to convince himself. Maybe he had forgotten to lock the door. Maybe the doll had fallen. Maybe. But deep inside, he already knew. The Labubu doll had moved, and it was watching him. Rajiv stood frozen in the dim hallway, the storm outside pounding against the house like a warning drum. The doll's unblinking eyes glistened as lightning flashed through the cracked window panes. Its crooked grin seemed sharper now, almost alive. He wanted to step forward, to grab it and toss it out into the rain, but his body refused to move. Every instinct screamed at him that touching it would be a mistake. Slowly, he forced himself to retreat. His hands shook as he fumbled for a matchstick, lit a candle, and held it up to the doll. Its face flickered in the flame, shadows dancing across its stitched features. The words sewn into its chest, Labubu, seemed darker, almost wet, as though ink had just seeped into the threads. Rajiv's throat was dry. "It's just a toy," he whispered, though the words felt thin against the silence that pressed against him. He bent down, picked it up with trembling hands, and carried it back to the study. His heart pounded louder than the thunder as he placed the doll back on the chair where it had first been. Without daring to look at its face again, he shut the door and turned the key in the lock. That night, sleep did not come easily. Every creak of the house felt amplified. Every gust of wind carried whispers that he swore were voices. When he finally drifted into uneasy slumber, the dreams came. In the dream, he was standing in the same hallway. The storm was louder, the walls of the house dripping with water as though the rain had seeped inside. At the far end of the hallway, he saw the doll. It was standing now, not sitting, not lying, but standing upright, its glassy eyes fixed on him. He couldn't move. His feet were nailed to the floor, his voice caught in his throat. The doll raised one arm slowly, its stiff hand pointing directly at him. And then it spoke. Not in words, but in broken giggles that echoed in the darkness, stretching too long, too hollow, until the laughter no longer sounded like a child's, but like something else. Something ancient, mocking, hungry. Rajiv woke with a scream, his body drenched in sweat. His heart raced as he looked around. The dream had ended, but the sound had not. The giggling was still there. It came from the study. Shaking, Rajiv grabbed a heavy iron rod he kept near the door. He lit another candle, forcing his trembling legs to carry him down the hallway. The laughter rose and fell, as though more than one voice joined in now. Children whispering, giggling, echoing behind the locked door. His breath grew shallow as he reached the study. The key was still in his pocket. He knew this was insane, but the sound was unbearable. With a shaking hand, he slid the key into the lock. The ladder stopped instantly, leaving only the roar of the storm outside. He pushed the door open. The candlelight flickered across the room. The chair where the doll had been was empty. Rajiv's eyes darted frantically. Shelves, desk, shadows, the doll was gone. Then he heard it, a faint scratching behind him. He spun around, candle shaking in his hand, and there it was, sitting just inside the doorway, blocking his exit. The Labubu doll stared up at him, its crook grin stretched unnaturally wide. For a moment, Rajiv thought he saw its mouth twitch, the thread straining as though something inside was trying to break free. The candle guttered. The shadows grew. Rajiv stumbled backward, his hand tightening on the iron rod. He wanted to smash it, destroy it, end this nightmare. He lifted the rod high, and the flame went out. Darkness swallowed the room whole. In the pitch black, Rajiv heard it again, the laughter. Close now. Right at his feet. He swung blindly with the rod, the metal clanging against the wooden floor. The laughter only grew louder, circling him, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. His panic rose, his breath sharp and shallow. He stumbled into the hallway, desperate to escape, slamming the door behind him. But the laughter followed. It was no longer confined to the study. It echoed through the entire house now, seeping from the walls, the floorboards, the ceiling. A chorus of whispers and giggles, playful yet menacing, filling every corner. Rajiv clutched his ears, staggering toward his bedroom. His reflection in the hallway mirror caught his eye, and for a fleeting second, he saw something standing behind him in the glass. Not just the doll, but a figure. A small, shadowy child, its head tilted at the same unnatural angle, its face hidden in darkness. When he spun around, nothing was there. Only the empty hallway. Only the whispers that would not stop. That night, Rajiv did not sleep again. He sat in his bed, clutching the iron rod, staring at the door, listening to the faint sound of laughter that rose and fell like waves against the silence. By morning, the doll was gone from the study. He found it sitting on his dining table, waiting. The storm had passed by morning, but Rajiv's house felt heavier, as though the night had stained its walls with something invisible. The air was thick and stale, despite the windows he flung open in desperation. Yet the weight remained. He stood frozen at the dining table, staring at the Labubu doll perched neatly in the center. Its stitched smile seemed even more grotesque in daylight, its button eyes gleaming as if they reflected something that wasn't there. Rajiv's first thought was to burn it. Take it outside, drench it in kerosene, and set it aflame until nothing remained but ash. But as soon as the idea crossed his mind, an uneasiness settled into his stomach, twisting tighter and tighter. Something about the doll warned him, don't try. Instead, he grabbed it by the arm, carried it out to the shed in his backyard, and shoved it into an old trunk. He slammed the lid shut, turned the lock, and shoved the key deep into his pocket. The shed felt safer than the house. At least the whispers didn't follow him there. He closed the shed door and walked away without looking back. For hours, Rajiv convinced himself he'd solved it. That nightmarish laughter, those whispers, perhaps it was all exhaustion. Maybe the doll was just a trick of the storm in his wary mind. By afternoon, he almost believed it. But then his phone rang. It was his sister, Anjali. She lived across the city with her 7-year-old daughter, Mira. Bye, she said with a nervous chuckle. You won't believe what Mira's been talking about all morning. Rajiv rubbed his forehead, still drained. What now? She says she has a new friend, a doll, a funny one with a wide smile and big round eyes. She says it came to her in her dreams last night. Rajiv's blood ran cold. Angela, his voice faltered. Did you give her a new toy? No, that's the strange thing. She described it perfectly, but I've never seen such a doll before. She keeps calling it Labubu. Do you know what that is? Rajiv's hand tightened around the phone until his knuckles whitened. He forced his voice steady. Keep her away from it. Don't let her play with it. Just don't let her talk about it any more. His sister laughed uneasily. Rajiv, she's a child. It's just her imagination. But Rajiv knew better. His mind raced. He had locked the doll away, hadn't he? And yet, somehow it had reached Mira, in her dreams. That night, Rajiv could not stay in the house. He left the lights on, sat awake, staring at the shed through his window. The shadows of the trees bent over it, swaying like crooked fingers in the wind. Hours crawled by, until finally exhaustion dragged him into a restless half-sleep. And then came the sound. A knock, not at his front door, not at the window, from the shed. Rajiv's body stiffened. His eyes darted to the dark silhouette of the shed outside. The sound came again, slow, deliberate knocks, as if something inside the trunk was demanding to be let out. He stayed frozen in his chair until dawn. By morning, the knocking had stopped. He stepped outside, the iron rod still clutched in his hand. The grass was damp with dew, the shed looming in silence. He unlocked the door cautiously, eyes darting around the dim space. The trunk was still there, closed, untouched, but the lock was broken. His stomach dropped. He lifted the lid with shaking hands. Empty, the doll was gone. He stumbled back, heart hammering, sweat pouring down his temples. The air inside the shed smelled faintly of damp earth and something else. Something metallic, like rust. Or blood. Rajiv ran back to house and dialed Anjali's number. Mira answered this time, her small voice cheerful. "Uncle, guess what?" She giggled. Rajiv's throat tightened. "What, Mira?" "I'm not scared anymore. Labubu says I don't have to be. He's here now. He's my friend." Her voice dropped into a whisper, playful but eerie. "He says soon he'll be yours too." The line went dead. Rajev stood there, phone pressed to his ear, listening to the silence, his pulse roaring in his ears. His eyes moved slowly to the dining table, and there it was, the Labubu doll, sitting neatly in its chair, staring at him, its grin wider than before. Rajiv sat at the dining table, staring at the Labubu doll as if it were a predator crouched before him. The daylight poured through the window, but it brought no comfort. Somehow, the doll looked sharper in the sun, its threadbare smile curling unnaturally at the corners, its glassy eyes gleaming with an intelligence that had no right to exist in cloth and string. The phone in his hand slipped slightly as sweat dampened his grip. He wanted to call Anjali back immediately, but dread pinned him. If the doll had found its way to Mira through dreams, if it had already crossed into her world, what would happen if he spoke about it openly? What if naming it aloud gave it more power? Still, his instincts screamed he couldn't leave his niece unprotected. He pocketed his phone, grabbed his car keys, and drove across the city. The whole way, he kept glancing at the backseat mirror, half expecting to see the doll sitting there grinning. But the seat remained empty, the silence of the car pressing in, broken only by the rhythmic thrum of his racing heart. When he arrived at Anjali's apartment, the unease deepened. Mira was standing in the hallway, waiting for him as if she knew he was coming. Her small face lit up. "Uncle Rajiv," she chirped, running into his arms. But when he hugged her, he felt her skin cold, as if she'd been standing in the dark for hours. "Where's your mother?" he asked. "In the kitchen," Mira said. "She doesn't like Labubu, but he likes me. He said he'll keep me safe." Rajiv's breath hitched. He crouched down, staring into her wide, innocent eyes. "Mira, where is Labubu right now?" The little girl giggled, putting a finger to her lips. "He doesn't like to be seen when grown-ups are around." "But he's here, he's always here." Anjali entered just then, drying her hands with a towel. She looked tired, her face pale. "Bye." She hasn't stopped talking to that imaginary doll since yesterday. It's unnerving. Rajiv clenched his fists. Imaginary, if only it were. That night Rajiv stayed with them. He insisted on it, though Anjali thought he was being paranoid. Mira went to bed early, hugging her blanket, whispering into the darkness as though someone lay beside her. Rajiv sat outside her room, listening. Hours passed, the whispers grew louder. Not Mira's voice anymore in a second one. Soft, high-pitched, playful yet hollow. Rajiv's blood froze. He opened the door just a crack. Mira lay facing the wall, her small shoulders rising and falling as she breathed. But there was something else on the bed. A shadow hunched over her, smaller than a human yet too large to be a toy. Its crooked head twitched as it leaned close to her ear. Rajiv burst in, switching on the light. The shadow was gone. Only Mira remained, sleeping peacefully. But at the foot of her bed, sitting upright with perfect posture, was the Labubu doll. Rajiv snatched it, his hand trembling violently. For a moment he thought he felt a faint heartbeat pulsing beneath the stitched chest. He nearly dropped it in horror, but forced himself to clutch it tighter. He marched out of the room, into the kitchen, and threw the doll onto the counter. Anjali appeared behind him, alarmed. "What are you doing?" "It's not her imagination." Rajiv snapped. His eyes darted to the doll. "This thing is real. It follows her. It follows me. We have to destroy it." Before Anjali could respond, the kitchen light flickered. The air turned icy, the shadows bending unnaturally. And then, a giggle, not from Mira's room, not from outside, from the doll itself. The sound was unmistakable. A child's laughter, hollow, distorted, crawling under the skin like a nest of insects. Anjali gasped, covering her mouth. The truth sank in instantly, her denial shattered. Rajiv grabbed a knife from the counter, raising it high above the doll. He brought it down with all his strength. The blade snapped. The doll remained unscathed, its grin wider than ever, its eyes glinting with mockery. The laughter grew louder, filling the apartment, pouring from the walls. Mira screamed from her bedroom, a scream so raw and piercing that Rajiv's heart nearly stopped. He sprinted to her room, Anjali right behind him. Mira was thrashing in her bed, her eyes wide open but glazed, as if trapped in a nightmare she couldn't wake from. Her lips moved rapidly, whispering words too fast, too strange to understand. And then, in a voice not her own, she spoke. "You can't take me away from him. Labubu is mine and I am his." Rajiv grabbed her shoulders, shaking her gently.
"Mira, fight it! Wake up!"
Her small body convulsed once, twice, and then went still. Her eyes rolled back, and she whispered one final phrase in that alien voice, as here. The lights went out. In the suffocating darkness, Rajiv heard tiny footsteps scuttling across the floor. Not human footsteps, lighter. Faster, crawling closer, and when the emergency light flickered back on, the doll was gone from the kitchen counter. It was standing at the doorway of Mira's room, watching. The emergency light cast a dim red glow over the room, and in that weak illumination Rajiv saw the doll, standing, not sitting, not slumped, but standing upright in the doorway like a sentinel. Its stitched grin had widened grotesquely, and its button eyes glimmered as though alive. Rajiv's breath caught. Anjali gasped behind him, clutching her daughter tightly. The doll did not move, but its presence filled the room like a suffocating fog. Rajiv. Anjali whispered, her voice breaking. This isn't possible. Dolls don't move on their own. He swallowed hard, his grip tightening on the broken knife. We're not dealing with a toy. This is something else, is something old. Then it happened. The doll tilted its head, slow and deliberate, the sound of its stitched neck pulling like tearing fabric. A faint giggle bubbled from its mouth, though its lips never moved. The sound filled the room, echoing off the walls. Mira's eyes fluttered open. She looked up at her uncle, her face pale, her small lips trembling. But when she spoke, it was not her voice. "Uncle," she said, her words dragging like rusted metal across stone. "Don't be afraid. He just wants to play." Rajiv's heart froze. That voice was the same one he had heard in the whispers, the same hollow tone that had haunted his house. The doll was speaking through her. "Mira, fight it!" Anjali cried, shaking her daughter. "Baby, wake up! It's not real." "It's not." But Mira turned her head, her expression empty, her eyes now as glassy and lifeless as the doll's. Rajiv stepped forward, his mind racing. He had read about possessions, about entities that latched onto children because of their innocence. But this was something worse. The doll wasn't just possessing Mira. It was tethered to her, feeding on her. The lights flickered again, and in that brief moment of darkness, Rajiv swore he saw two shapes in the room, Mira on the bed, and beside her, a smaller, shadowy figure with twisted limbs crouching over her body. When the light returned, only Mira remained, but her lips were still moving, whispering to something unseen. He turned to Anjali. "We can't stay here. We need to leave now." But the doll moved. It took one step into the room. The sound of its tiny feet tapping against the wooden floor was wrong, too sharp, like nails scratching against glass. Rajiv lunged forward, grabbed the doll, and hurled it against the wall with all his strength. It hit with a thud, slid down, and then stood back up. Unharmed, the doll's grin seemed wider than ever now, stretching unnaturally across its face. Its button eyes locked on Rajiv, and in that moment, he felt something clawing into his mind. A pressure, a darkness, like the doll was staring not just at him, but into him. Mira screamed suddenly, clutching her head.
Stop!
"He doesn't like it when you hurt him." Anjali held her tighter, sobbing. "Please, Rajiv, do something." Rajiv's mind raced. He grabbed a jar of salt from the kitchen shelf, remembering old stories about wards and protections. He poured a circle around Mira's bed, his hands shaking. The doll stopped. It tilted its head again as if amused, then slowly backed away to the far corner of the room. Its giggle grew faint, but the malice in its presence never left. For a few hours, the night dragged on in eerie silence. Mira finally fell into a restless sleep within the salt circle, her breathing shallow but steady. Anjali collapsed on the floor beside her, clutching her hand. Rajiv didn't sleep. He sat in the corner, eyes fixed on the doll. And the doll sat in the shadows watching him. By dawn, Rajiv thought he might lose his mind. But when sunlight poured in through the window, not a trace remained. Rajiv slumped back in exhaustion, thinking maybe, just maybe, the nightmare had ended, until he saw Mira. She was awake, sitting on the bed, smiling faintly, and she was holding something in her hand, a single black button, the kind that had once been sewn into the doll's eye. She looked up at him, her voice soft but carrying that same alien echo. "He's part of me now. Uncle, you can't stop it."